40 miles off the coast of France. HMS Campbelltown, an aging destroyer weighing over 1,000 tons, is amongst a raiding flotilla moving through the darkness towards the German-held port of Saint-Nazaire. On either side, a column of small motor launches, bristling with machine guns and cannon. Crammed below decks, 269 elite British Army commandos steel themselves for what lies ahead. They know the next few hours have the potential to decide the course of the entire war. 2.5 years into World War II, Nazi Germany dominates Europe. A desperate campaign rages in the North Atlantic, where British survival depends on convoys bringing supplies from its new ally, America. Now, Germany threatens to unleash a weapon that could wreak havoc along those vital convoy routes. The Tirpitz is the most powerful battleship in the German Navy, more deadly even than her famed sister ship, the Bismarck. But her huge size poses a dilemma for the German Navy, one that only Saint-Nazaire can solve.
The reason that the dock at Saint-Nazaire was so important was because it was the only dry dock in Western Europe that could handle a ship the size of the Tirpitz. It was the only place that the Tirpitz could get repaired. If they couldn't repair the Tirpitz, then they couldn't risk sending it out into battle. Destroying the dry dock destroyed the battleship, even if they never touched the actual battleship itself.
Bombers aren't accurate enough to destroy the dock from the air. The French resistance can't move enough explosives into such a well-guarded port. Only a commando raid by sea can succeed. The plan was audacious. A British raiding force must sneak 18 boats and a destroyer 5 miles up the Loire estuary under the noses of German defenses, who are manning searchlights and ready to unleash a battery of coastal guns, powerful enough to sink their ships with a single hit. They will set a delayed action fuse on board the destroyer, timed to detonate 8 hours after it is rammed into the dry dock. If the ships make it through the deadly guns, then assault teams must storm the docks and plant explosives before 5,000 highly trained enemy can react. They are armed with a massive arsenal of weapons from 20 and 40mm cannons to machine guns. Then, while the explosive teams complete their objectives, the remaining commandos must keep open their only means of escape, a jetty where the motor launches will be waiting to take them home. But holding off 5,000 heavily armed Germans and making it past the guns alive won't be easy. Once they exit the Loire, they hope the timer will detonate the bomb on board the destroyer and blow the dry dock gate to smithereens.
There were a lot of stages to the raid. It was a very complicated plan. Everything had to happen in a certain sequence, and it had to happen precisely for the operation to succeed.
It was going to be extremely difficult to pull off. There's an old military saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. This means the best plans are simple and flexible. But this was fiendishly complex, involving 29 teams attacking 17 targets. It meant that if something went wrong, it was going to be very difficult for the commandos to recover and improvise their way out of trouble.
The cornerstone of the operation is HMS Campbelltown. To blow the dock gate, 4.5 tons of high explosives have been packed into her hull with an 8-hour time delay fuse. Her 4-inch guns have been replaced by a 12-pounder gun and 8 Oerlikon 20mm cannon, firing 450 rounds per minute. Extra armor has been welded to her sides and wheelhouse to protect her crew from the heavy fire she'll come under from enemy shore defenses. Finally, the raiders disguise the ship, hoping to bluff their way as close to the target as possible. They cut down 2 of her funnels to make her look like a German destroyer, and will fly a German naval flag from her mast. Campbelltown and the rest of the flotilla enter the estuary of the Loire River. The destroyer's captain is 33-year-old Lieutenant Commander Sam Beatty. Only recently given command of the ship, Beatty was told his first mission would be to crash her into an enemy dock. But he's an experienced officer with a cool head and a steady nerve.
The first evidence of the enemy's defenses came when the searchlights on the north shore were switched on, swept north, then south, but stopped sweeping just before picking up the rear vessels of the squadron.
Beatty knows the raid needs all the help it can get. As he searches the skies, the sound of the diversionary air attack overhead grew louder. British bombers had arrived over Saint-Nazaire, right on cue.
The RAF bombing at the beginning was intended both to distract the Germans from what was coming from the sea and also, hopefully, do enough damage to the German defenders that they would be trying to recover from that and not paying attention to what was coming at them from the ocean.
But the result is not what the raiders had hoped. The commandos had requested a large-scale bombing raid with 350 aircraft, but only get 62 because the Air Force refuses to divert aircraft from its main bombing campaign. To make matters worse, thick cloud obscures the port. The RAF won't risk killing large numbers of French civilians, and few bombs are dropped. Instead, the bombers circle overhead, hoping this will prove enough of a diversion. But their unusual behavior only raises German suspicions.
This small-scale raid didn't distract the Germans, it only put them on alert. When the three services work together, the effects can be devastating. But in this instance, inter-service rivalry and poor communication seriously jeopardized the success of this mission.
For now, Beatty and the raiders remain undetected as they slip past the German radar station at Le Croisic. The next hurdle? A shallow channel in which the Campbelltown could run aground at any moment.
There was only one route into the port, and it was heavily guarded by the Germans. But the British noticed that at high tide, there was actually an alternate way to get to the dry dock. If you took very light ships, or specially lightened ships, you could sail them over the sand flats and come right up onto the dry dock from a different angle.
The Campbelltown was stripped of all items not essential to the raid, such as torpedo tubes to make her lighter. She drew just 11 feet of water, but even with a high spring tide, there would be only inches to spare. There's a sudden, awful juddering aboard Campbelltown as she hits the sandbank. Below decks, Lieutenant Karen Purdon, a volunteer from the Royal Ulster Rifles. Only 20, he's already a veteran of an earlier commando raid on Norway. He'll lead one of the demolition teams tasked with destroying vital dockyard targets.
We felt her dragging herself, propellers thrashing through the mud, and were greatly relieved when she was floating freely once more.
Lieutenant Stuart Chant, rugby player and former stock exchange runner, is leading another demolition team. He's on deck when Campbelltown grounds for a second time.
A few seconds later at 055 hours, we slowed again as our propeller screws somehow drove us across yet another sandbar.
It's a heart-stopping moment. If the destroyer becomes grounded, she'll be at the mercy of the German guns as soon as the sun rises. The defenses around Saint-Nazaire were formidable, in theory, impregnable. 28 guns, from 75mm cannon to massive 240mm railway guns, protected the entrance to the estuary. 43 more guns protected the approach to Saint-Nazaire, mostly 20mm and 40mm cannon, used for both coastal and anti-aircraft defense. There were searchlights along both banks of the river. In the port itself, yet more guns. Close defense units guarded the port. They could quickly summon hundreds of reinforcements from nearby garrisons. Purdon, Chant, and the rest of the commandos are sailing into the jaws of death. They know that many of them won't be coming back. The head of the commandos has already told them as much.
I want you to be quite clear, this is not just an ordinary raid. It is an important operation of the war. It is a very hazardous operation. I am quite confident you will get in and do the job all right. But I don't expect any of you to get out again.
The guys were told it was pretty much a one-way ticket. But the camaraderie was such that they didn't care. As long as they were together, they'd go into any situation. This is the kind of dedication you get from a tight-knit and elite unit like the commandos.
On HMS Campbelltown's foredeck, Major Copeland is second in command. A World War I veteran, and at 44, the oldest commando on the raid. Now he scans the hostile shore, looking for signs of enemy activity.
On we sailed in that hushed river. No sound save the steady beat of our engines and our own murmured conversation.
The flotilla is just 2 miles from its target. Suddenly, more searchlights blaze into life. They soon pick up the Campbelltown and the motor launches. But the Germans hesitate. The Campbelltown's flying a German flag. She might be one of their own.
Remember that the British had cut the Campbelltown down to look like a German destroyer. And so at first, when the Germans spotted this unknown ship coming in, they thought it might be a German destroyer coming back from the Atlantic.
Beatty has one more trick up his sleeve. When the Germans signal a challenge and fire warning shots, he replies using a German call sign, signaling that they're firing on a friendly ship. Every second gained is precious as the destroyer steams closer and closer to its target. For a few crucial minutes, the bluff works. But when the ship refuses to stop, the Germans realize they've been tricked, and all hell breaks loose. As a deluge of fire is unleashed from all sides, the mission is compromised, and they haven't even reached their target. As German bullets and shells rain in on the British raiding force approaching Saint Nazaire, Beatty orders the German flag to be taken down, and the white ensign raised. Then, the whole flotilla opens up.
Campbelltown opened fire with all guns aiming at searchlights. These usually went out when fired at, waited a short time, and came on again.
World War I veteran Major Bill Copeland has never seen anything like it.
It seemed as though every gun on Earth had opened fire on us. In immediate reply, our Oerlikon guns aft opened up with their deadly crackle.
Developed by a Swiss company, the Oerlikon cannon was widely used by both the British and American navies as an anti-aircraft gun. Firing 20mm explosive shells at a rate of over 7 per second, it was brutally effective against light armored targets, but lacked the punch to take on enemy fortifications, soon to prove a serious handicap for the raiders. Commando machine gunners join in, firing 500 rounds a minute from Bren guns, the staple British infantry support weapon of World War II.
This is the Bren gun, the British light machine gun. It's a really chunky, good piece of kit. The magazine has a distinctive shape. Comes off easy enough. It's solid and robust. Holds 30 rounds. Slots in quickly. The Bren gun can be fired either at the hip or in the shoulder. It can also be fired on the ground using the bipod to have a sustained rate of fire. If this weapon has any vice whatsoever, it's almost that it's too accurate. When you're firing, the grouping is almost too tight. What you want with a support weapon is a slightly wider grouping to keep the enemy's heads down. The new modern-day general-purpose machine guns are actually designed to be less accurate than this World War II weapon.
Even with the Bren's famed stopping power, it's a one-sided firefight. British ships lit up by searchlight beams are easy targets. Casualties quickly start to mount. Peeking over Campbelltown's armored screen, Lieutenant Chant can see the small mortar launches are being riddled with shells.
There were fires blazing on the surface of the river astern of us, where more of our motor launchers were fighting their desperate battle for survival against the overwhelming firepower of the German guns.
15 Fairmile B motor launches carry the bulk of the commandos in and will be their means of escape. They are wooden boats, 112 feet long, with two 600 horsepower engines producing top speeds of 20 knots. 2 Oerlikon cannons and machine guns provide fire support. Normally used for coastal patrols and submarine hunting, they were never designed for an assault role, but they are all the Navy can spare. Their greatest weakness? A complete lack of armor. Even a rifle bullet could pass through the side. Worse, to get them to Saint-Nazaire and back, extra gas tanks have to be installed on their decks. A single hit and the entire motor launch could become a floating gasoline bomb. Purdon, below decks on Campbelltown, is better protected than most, but even he's not safe.
We felt and heard the hammering of German shells and bullets striking against Campbelltown's hull. A shell, glowing red, passed through the wardroom as we sat there, but continued out without exploding.
In the wheelhouse, Beatty calls for full speed. He's searching through the darkness and gunfire for a landmark to guide him in. He thinks he's found it, but it's the wrong one.
The glare of the searchlights made identification somewhat difficult. A lighthouse could be seen, and it was at first thought that this was the old mole. The alarm bells were rung to warn for ramming. However, it was seen that the Campbelltown was approaching the Avant port, and the wheel was put hard to starboard and course altered.
The armored wheelhouse is taking heavy hits from all sides. Helmsman Chief Petty Officer Wellstead is hit and killed. His replacement is struck down within seconds. Into the breach steps Lieutenant Nigel Tibbets, the man in charge of packing the ship with its deadly cargo of high explosives.
Lieutenant Tibbets then took over the wheel, altered round the old mole, and steered the ship to the lock.
18 knots and only 100 yards to go. We hung on like grim death to any protection, expecting a terrific shock, and then impact.
She was brought suddenly, judderingly to a stop. Her bows jammed into and over the gate.
Thanks to a remarkable piece of seamanship, Campbelltown successfully completes the first stage of the raid. Lieutenant Commander Beatty's only remark, well, there we are, 4 minutes late. The Royal Navy have done their job. Now the commandos must do theirs. The commandos are an elite force formed for just such an operation. They are the brainchild of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, created to hit back at Hitler by launching lightning strikes against Fortress Europe.
Churchill, who always had a great turn of phrase, called them butcher and bolt operations. We're going to butcher some Germans and then we're going to bolt away.
Every commando had volunteered from a regular unit for special service and survived a rigorous selection process. Stuart Chant, who plays for the famous London Wasps rugby club, makes the grade.
Every man had to be able to swim. Since the units had no transport, they had to march long distances non-stop. The standard set for all ranks was 60 miles in 24 hours, almost twice the speed of the standard infantryman. We were also initiated into the skills of handling explosives, demolition, and unarmed combat.
2 former policemen from Shanghai, William Fairbairn and Eric Sykes, trained the commandos in hand-to-hand combat. They also design a new knife for them, based on their experience of street fighting.
The Fairbairn Sykes knife is synonymous with the commandos and special forces. In fact, this knife is still the insignia on the commandos badge to this day. It was a beautiful, thin, slender blade designed to go into the rib cage deep and come out without any problems whatsoever.
For weeks, the commandos trained relentlessly for street fighting at night, while demolition teams practiced by laying charges over and over again. By late March, the commandos were brimming with confidence.
I think we could all have found our way blindfolded to our winding house and laid our demolition charges likewise.
We had trained hard. We knew our jobs and we felt equal to any demand.
For the raid, the commandos are divided into two types of team. Demolition teams, like those led by Chant and Purdon, will blow up dockyard facilities. They carry rucksacks with up to 90 pounds of explosives per man. This heavy load meant the only weapon they carried was a Colt .45 pistol.
The Colt Browning Automatic, a US icon. It fires a 45-round slug and one of the only weapons to be used through both world wars. This pistol is a great close-quarter weapon. It's light, it's reliable. That's why it's been in service for over 70 years.
The remaining commandos are split into assault teams to take out enemy positions and protect the demolition squads as they work. They're heavily armed with automatic weapons, including Bren guns and the American .45 caliber Thompson machine gun.
This is the M1 Thompson submachine gun. It's an American gun. You probably recognize it more from the Prohibition days than the big gangster Hollywood movies. In those movies, though, you would have seen had a big drum magazine. These magazines held 50 to 100 rounds. The problem with a drum magazine is that the rounds kept jamming within the rifle itself. That can't happen on a battlefield. So they changed it to one of these, a vertical magazine which holds about 30 rounds.
Now the commandos' moment has come. As the motor launches begin their landings, the men aboard the battered Campbelltown are already racing off towards their targets. Campbelltown's 70 or so commandos are divided into 9 teams. 2 assault teams will lead the way, taking out enemy positions on the left and right. In their wake, the demolition teams will move forward to their targets. Lieutenant Chant's team to the dry dock pump house, Lieutenant Purdon's to the north winding shed, and more teams to the north dock gate and south winding shed. When all their targets are destroyed, they will withdraw to the extraction point.
The British had 3 major objectives. They wanted to blow the gates with the Campbelltown and cripple the access point to the dry dock. But they also wanted to destroy the machinery of the dry dock itself. Gates can be replaced, concrete can be repaired, but the machinery, the pumps, the machines that opened and closed the gates were very hard for the Germans to manufacture. If the commandos were able to destroy those as well, then not only would the dock be damaged, but it would be inoperable for a very long time indeed.
Commando assault teams take out enemy gun emplacements in the immediate vicinity, buying the raiders crucial minutes before the Germans can respond to their sudden small-scale invasion. They clear a path for Lieutenant Chant and his demolition team, making their way to the pump house. The pump house raises and lowers the water level of the dry dock. Its destruction is second in importance only to the dock gate itself. A small charge blows in the locked door. Chant has been wounded in the leg during the run-in and has to painfully and carefully make his way down several flights of steps to the basement. The waterproof charges are carefully placed to cause maximum damage. Chant's team use an explosive that's up to almost twice as powerful as TNT.
We are going to simulate our pump house with a washing machine. It's got a pump in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some plastic explosive that was actually used to sabotage the pump house. We've got a modern equivalent, but it's based on the same explosive, RDX. We're going to take 100 grams, we're going to place it on top of the washing machine, put a detonator in it, and see what happens. Charge was to here, and it's basically punched straight down through the washing machine and completely wrecked it. It's just an easy to use, easy to carry, easy to deploy, powerful explosive, perfect for that sort of sabotage operation.
To destroy the Saint Nazaire pump house, the commandos will lay nearly 700 times more explosive. Chant lights the 90-second fuse. The wounded officer, helped by one of his sergeants, hobbles up a maze of staircases in near total darkness, reaching safety with seconds to spare. 150 pounds of explosive tears through the building, reducing the pumps that empty the water from the dry dock to useless junk. As Chant's team blows the pump house, other demolition teams are laying charges at their targets, while Lieutenant Commander Beatty and his crew stand by for evacuation from the stranded Campbelltown. Lieutenant Purdon's team has furthest to go, making its way towards its objective, the North Winding Shed. He has close protection from Lieutenant Dennison's three-man team. When the force comes under fire from a group of Germans in a trench, Dennison's men swing into action.
This was a complicated mission. The key was momentum. Without it, they wouldn't be able to disorientate a well-prepared enemy. When the commandos encounter the German positions, it's crucial they keep their plan simple, so it can be executed rapidly.
Dennison keeps the Germans pinned down as two commandos get close enough to throw grenades, killing everyone in the trench. With Dennison's team ensuring safe passage, Purdon continues to his objective, the North Winding Shed, which houses the machinery that opens and closes the dry dock's northern gate. Taking it out will be another crippling blow against the dock.
We came to our winding house and found it had a heavy metal door. I tried unsuccessfully to shoot the lock in. Then Rong Chung burst it open with a sledgehammer. Once inside, following the drill we knew so well, we laid our charges and connected them up.
When all the explosives are connected, Purdon's demolition team withdraws to a safe distance and blows the charge.
It was a memorable sight. The entire building seemed to rise several feet vertically before it exploded and disintegrated like a collapsed house of cards.
The plan seems to be running like clockwork. But on the other side of the docks, their only means of escape is being shot to pieces. The raiders have achieved their primary objectives. Campbelltown is lodged in the dock gates with her explosive cargo, and demolition teams have blown up the dock's winding sheds, pump house, and damaged its northern gate. As per orders, the teams withdraw towards the Old Mole for pickup by the motor launches. As they feared, the place was swarming with enemy, making the chances of them getting out alive or avoiding capture seem almost impossible. But while Purdon's demolition team withdraw, they come under fire from German gun positions around the dock.
The noise of the firing was terrific, and the place continued to be lit up by searchlights and the fire of explosions.
Major Copeland, the commando's second-in-command, is also making for the old mole.
We tried to get round the buildings. 12-foot walls barred our way, and time was flying. Bunching together, we ran and dodged from cover to cover and managed always to keep one jump ahead of the machine gunners.
This is a dangerous way to operate. Normally, when fighting in towns, you need to clear the buildings as you go.
At all costs, the men must try to avoid the obvious route. The commandos have to move from house to house using roofs and back gardens, even blowing holes through adjoining walls. But the obvious route is their only way out. And their extraction depends on the heavily armed commando teams holding the old mole until the raiding party can board the motor launches and make their escape. Unfortunately, there's been a problem. The motor launches, unprotected and with gas tanks on their decks, have sailed into a wall of enemy fire. Several are already in flames.
One of the small boats got hit by 37mm cannon fire and essentially just blew up in the water. Out of the crew and commandos on that, only one guy made it out alive.
The decision to use wooden-hulled motor launches, lacking real firepower or armor, has proved to be disastrously optimistic. Few of the commando teams get ashore unscathed. The unit tasked with capturing the old mole is wiped out before it even lands. It means their evacuation point remains in enemy hands. Of the 6 boats scheduled to land at the old mole, only one had briefly made it before being hit by a barrage of grenades and close-range fire. The raiders are stranded. Major Bill Copeland is in charge of the evacuation phase, but quickly realizes there's nothing left to take command of.
My beautiful picture of 14 empty motor launches was but a dream. They were mostly sunk or burnt out, whilst in the night behind them blazed a sea of burning petrol.
Heavy pillars of smoke and orange bursts of explosions denoted that there were indeed no ships to take us home to England. I don't think many of us were too surprised.
From the very beginning of the planning, it was clear to everybody that the escape route was going to be very difficult and very unlikely to succeed.
Raid Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Newman faces a tough decision. Of his initial force of 269 commandos, over half have been wounded and ammo is running low. The German garrison is now fully alerted to their presence. German sailors, police, and dock workers have been hastily called into action, and soon they'll overwhelm the commandos' protection force. They're also under lethal fire from 20mm anti-aircraft cannon, mounted on German ships and the roof of the U-boat pens. Newman summons his second-in-command, Major Copeland, to help him hastily improvise a new escape plan.
We had a quick consultation, deciding to push through the town in order to make the country beyond. Split into small groups and head for Spain. I assembled all officers, to whom Charles explained the situation.
Chant, Purdon, and the rest of the officers listen in silence. The plan means fighting their way through a town teeming with German reinforcements before crossing nearly 400 miles of enemy territory to reach neutral Spain.
For the commandos, it was just another day in the office. This is what they've trained for. It was a long shot, but they are in no mood to give up.
We formed up and, led by our assault and protection parties, moved forward at the double.
As the raiders prepare to shoot their way clear, on the river, the few surviving motor launches head for the open sea. Lieutenant Commander Beatty, the Campbelltown's captain, and the rest of his surviving crew escape aboard ML-177, along with Tibbets, the explosives expert who guided the ship into the dock gates. Within a few miles of safety, An exploding shell knocks out the motor launch's engine. Then machine gun fire riddles the stricken vessel. Lieutenant Nigel Tibbets is amongst those killed. The wooden boat is torn apart by a barrage of German shells, forcing the survivors into the freezing water. The wounded soon slip below the waves. Just a handful are rescued. ML-306 was also making top speed for safety when she encountered the German torpedo boat, the Jaguar. Massively outgunned, the commandos and sailors open up with everything they've got. Finally pummeled into submission, ML-306 surrenders. Back in Saint-Nazaire, the stranded commandos begin their desperate dash for freedom. Avoiding the old town square, which is swept by German fire, they circle round towards the one bridge that connects them to the main town. Despite the danger, the commandos advance with almost reckless enthusiasm. Amongst them are Lieutenant Karen Purdon, whose team took out the North Winding Shed, and Stuart Chant, who narrowly escaped his own demolition of the pump house.
We were being fired upon from all sides, some of it coming from very close range, but we charged on rather like a pack of ruggerforwards. There was a certain amount of laughter, cursing, and calls of encouragement, and every now and then, someone was hit.
Corin Purdon followed me, only to catch his foot in some wire and sprawl full length to a halt at my feet. We burst into laughter and hauled him to his feet. Such was the atmosphere at that moment.
Despite the laughter, men are soon falling to the heavy German fire. Chant is shot in the knee and unable to move.
There was no way I could continue to run or walk even, and I collapsed. Ron Butler, one of my sergeants, would have none of this, and with young Jimmy Brown, carried me until I realized I was a hindrance to their own chances of escape, and I ordered them to leave.
As Copeland, Purdon, and other surviving commandos reach the bridge that stands between them and the town of Saint-Nazaire, they mass for a last do-or-die assault across 70 yards of open ground.
There's no time to work around the enemy positions. Their only chance is a headlong charge through the German defenders on the bridge and past the pillbox at the far end. Firing from the hip isn't going to be found in any tactical aid memoir, but needs must. This needs to be fast and punchy.
A hail of enemy fire erupted as we crossed the bridge, projectiles slamming into its girders, bullets whining and ricocheting off them and from the cobbles.
Enemy machine guns fire high. Within seconds, the commandos are across. Major Copeland stops to empty his pistol into the slit of a pillbox before the raiders disappear into the streets of Saint-Nazaire.
We split into smaller parties, and I was among a group with Colonel Newman and Major Copeland. Then we started what has been since called the Saint-Nazaire obstacle race, clambering over backyard walls and into and out of houses.
With dawn approaching and hundreds of Germans combing the streets, the commandos go to ground. They plan to wait out the daylight hours and make a break for it when darkness returns. But the net soon closes in. Major Copeland and 15 others are hiding in a cellar.
I heard the noise of heavy footsteps above me, then a voice, then loud German shouting. I expected a hand grenade in our midst at any moment, but it was not to be. Instead, Germans, bristling with grenades and Tommy guns, appeared in the doorway. I joined the procession of those who could walk up the stairs and across the street.
It's only a matter of time before each group is cornered and forced to surrender. The raid appears to be ending in disaster, and their ship, designed to deliver the decisive blow in a massive explosion, still lies silent above the dock gate. As the Germans continue their house-to-house clearance, Chant, shot through the knee and unable to move, was soon found.
Walking towards us were 3 Germans in black uniforms and steel helmets. They were hostile and were armed with Schmeiser machine pistols. The Germans were very jumpy and reacted violently when they saw us, shouting and pointing their firearms.
Chant joins a group of other wounded prisoners assembled on a street pavement outside a cafe. He's seen here with his wounded knee bandaged in one of many images recorded that morning by German news crews and photographers, eager to record what seems to have been a reckless and disastrous British raid.
They actually thought at first that they had managed to defend it. Yeah, there was a British destroyer wedged into the gates, but the destroyer could be pulled out of the gates safely. So the Germans, at least initially after the raid was over, thought that they had defended it fairly well and preserved the dry dock.
More commandos and sailors are brought in from the river. Amongst them, Lieutenant Commander Beatty, wearing nothing but a blanket. He'd been picked up by a German torpedo boat after the destruction of ML-177. There's one thing the prisoners desperately want to know, but none dare ask. Why hasn't HMS Campbelltown exploded? The destroyer remains stuck fast. Her bows containing 4.5 tons of high-explosive amytal poised directly over the dry dock gate. The explosives should have detonated more than an hour ago. Now there are German officers and technical specialists inspecting the ship. They're soon joined by souvenir hunters, even the mistresses and girlfriends of German officers. If the Germans discover the explosives on board and defuse them, the whole raid will have been for nothing. The Germans think the British have foolishly tried to destroy the dock gate by simply ramming an old destroyer into it. A German officer tells Beatty, "Your people obviously didn't know what a hefty thing that lock gate is. It really is useless trying to smash it with a flimsy destroyer. Everything seems to have been in vain. All their dead and suffering for nothing."
There was a huge roar and concussion as HMS Campbelltown blew up. And we all gave an enormous cheer.
The whole town is shaken by the blast.
There were about 100 Germans on board the destroyer when it blew up. The human remains were spread so widely that it took several days for the cleanup parties to find all of them and get rid of them.
The 1,500-ton gate is torn from its seat. The river floods in, taking the remains of Campbelltown with it. The Saint-Nazaire raid has achieved its goal, in the face of near impossible odds.
Despite all the difficulties and despite all the things that went wrong, the raid was an overwhelming success. It crippled the dry dock so seriously that the Germans actually were never able to repair it during the war. The dry dock was actually not working again until 1947, over 5 years after the actual raid.
The destruction wrought on the Saint-Nazaire dry dock ensured the Tirpitz never did sail into the Atlantic. Instead, the mighty warship spent the war hiding in Norwegian fjords, where she was finally destroyed by RAF Lancasters in November 1944. But success came at a heavy price. Only 3 of the raid's 17 motor launches escaped the inferno of Saint-Nazaire and made it back to England. Of the 611 men on the raid, 2/3 of the raiding force were either killed or captured. Incredibly, 5 commandos did escape, reaching neutral Spain with the help of French civilians, then crossing to Gibraltar and returning by ship to England. Many of the 169 British dead were buried by the Germans with full military honors. Amongst the 215 prisoners were World War I veteran Major Bill Copeland, wounded Lieutenant Stuart Chant, young Irish officer Karen Purdon, and Campbelltown skipper, Lieutenant Commander Sam Beattie.
The raid on Saint Nazaire has been described as the greatest raid of all time, and there's some truth to that evaluation.
The Saint Nazaire raid remains one of the most remarkable feats in military history. Thanks to a daring plan, executed with astonishing courage and determination, the commandos made an impact out of all proportion to their number, and in the process, forged a legend that endures to this day.